It's time to take a good long look in the mirror. Hello and welcome to Raw Dead Review of the Day, and today I am taking a look at the 2013 movie Oculus. Now, taking into account everybody in the real world as well as everybody on the interwebs, it is by far the most requested review that has come across my ears. Everybody's been asking me for the last year or so, why don't you review Oculus? And the reason for that is because I really didn't feel too comfortable reviewing it because it has been several years since I've seen it, and way too much time to just start recording a review without having watched it again for a refresher. And there were elements of it that I really didn't care for on that first watch, so it's nothing that I've been really jumping up and down in excitement to get back into, but I decided it was time. I needed to give this another shot. You know, maybe I just hadn't had my coffee the first time around, and I was just in a little bit of a grump. Certainly situations like that have happened in the past where I watch a movie the first time, and years later, as I've grown and matured and exposed myself to more of the horror movie genres out there, my mind can get changed. It certainly happened with Dario Argento's Deep Red, and I wanted to give this another opportunity. And so I watched it this last weekend, and my opinion on this one really didn't change, but I at least have a little bit more visual memory and insight and can possibly explain it just a little bit further on why. This review does have spoilers in it. I really don't think I can get around that. I can't really get into the elements of what bothered me about this movie without revealing too much. And I could try and dance around it, and if I tried to dance around it in a spoiler-free review, I would probably be giving too many allusions and hints that people could figure out what I'm talking about anyway, and it just seems like it would be way too exhausting for about the same amount of results. So I may as well just make this a spoilery review and talk about it freely. So be warned, if you've never seen it and you don't want it spoiled, you should probably stop watching this. That being said, this movie follows Kaylee and Tim Russell, brother and sister, played by Karen Gillan and Brenton Thwaites, respectively. And Tim gets released from a mental hospital and meets up with his sister, Kaylee. And Kaylee reveals to him that she has a plan involving the situations of why he was put in the mental institution in the first place. And there's a lot of backstory that goes on here. This movie, well, first of all, it was directed by Mike Flanagan, and at this point, you might know him as the creator of the Hell House series on Netflix. And this movie follows a lot of the same format, where it has the consequences of previous events taking place in the present day, and that's what we're introduced to. And as the storyline continues, we follow present day course of action while also having interspersed past reveals brought to the light and brought to the table so that we are more familiar with the circumstances of the present as the storyline continues. And this does the exact same thing, where throughout the entirety of the movie, we are revealing more and more of what led Tim to be in the mental institution in the first place, the confluence of events that happened when they were children as their parents befell the foul evil that is contained within this haunted mirror, basically. And that's what really the movie revolves around, is this haunted mirror. As children, their father put it up in his new office, and things started going really wrong. The family started getting torn apart. People were seeing things that weren't there, and it was just this suspected level of psychosis. But then just things kept escalating to the point where everything was fractured and horrible circumstances ensued within. So now we're in the present day, and at the beginning of our storyline, Kaylee has a plan to confront the mirror and try to overcome it. And her plan is a very, very solid one. One thing that I really love in horror movies is when characters play things smart, when they really give things a lot of thought and develop a solid plan and execute it admirably well, at the very least at the start. And what I will say in favor of this movie is that the Kaylee character This is one of the best examples I have ever seen in a horror film of a character playing it smart. More so's the pity as far as why I didn't care for it, the movie overall, and how it wound up. She has cameras watching cameras, the mirror in the dead center of the room with cameras on it, and the cameras watching those cameras. She has timers going off to remind them to eat, timers going off to remind them to hydrate, and of course, the timer where if they don't reset it every so often, a big anchor with weights on it will swing down and smash the mirror. And the mirror will protect itself under normal circumstances. If you try to shoot a gun at it, it will distract you with the vision and, basically have you put the gun down. Or if you do manage to pull the trigger, your arm will have mysteriously just kind of gone to the left or the right and missed it. But this is a circumstance where the physical environment is such so that the threat is always placed, and by having the characters be met with danger or dismemberment or being dead, the timer will still go off and the pendulum will still swing and smash the mirror. So it, for as far as the antagonist goes, needs to keep the protagonist alive as they basically put the experiment to test. Kaylee is ultimately trying to get recorded on camera the events surrounding this mirror and the evil within, and basically prove that it's haunted. She's not necessarily out to kill it. She just wants to redeem her brother and redeem their past and prove that what they were saying as children was in fact real, that this mirror is in fact haunted. So the whole setup I loved, and I was absolutely on board for. Here's the big problem for me, is the portion where they are having their conversation outside of the office, outside of the room where the mirror is being kept. And when they go back into the office, they find that the cameras that are pointed at the mirror are instead butted up against each other and pointed at themselves. And looking at the cameras, watching the cameras, they see their previous conversation play out, but instead of them being outside the room, they were inside the room moving the cameras, and their level of perception had changed. So that's ultimately how the cameras moved, is because they were the ones that moved it, and they just weren't conscious of that. They thought they were having a conversation outside the office. Now, this is a big problem for me, and it's a slight one in perspective, but it's a massive one in storyline. By having an element of manipulating perception, especially with our protagonist, that we are watching the movie through their eyes, not necessarily, first-person viewpoint, but we are watching the movie through their eyes. We are following them, and by manipulating their perspective, that's perfectly fine. That can be gotten around and can be explained and can be overcome by the characters. But when we both manipulate the perspective and the actions, then it becomes a no-win situation. Now the evil is so powerful that is now boring. Now the evil that no matter how smart the characters can play this, no matter what things they think of, no matter what situations they can come up with, the evil can overcome it by basically just making it not be that way. And that's a huge problem in terms of maintaining suspense and maintaining interest from the audience. Imagine, if you will, you had a chess game unlike any other, where the hero had all the chess pieces on the board, and the villain only had the king, and the king could not move. It's a static mirror. All it can really do is manipulate the environment around it. So, in this game, the hero is not wanting to get a checkmate. It is wanting a stalemate. It is not wanting to kill. It is not wanting to be killed. It is simply wanting to trap. And on the other side, definitely wants to kill. But every time the hero makes a move, the villain's move, instead of moving its own piece, can manipulate the pieces on the other side. That's its move. And every single turn, it can manipulate the pieces more and more and more, change more of them, move them further and further away. And ultimately what you have at that point is a boring game. All the villain is trying to do is basically get the hero in a place where their pieces are strategically in a position where, through a confluence of the hero's move and the villain's ability to manipulate it, puts it within striking distance. And then, game over. And from an audience's perspective, who do we really rally behind? Is it the hero? The hero has no chance. No matter what smart play they make, no matter how they set up the board, no matter what pieces they decide to put into play to trap this thing, the villain can just, nope, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, that didn't happen, and that didn't happen. Yep, I'm fine. Okay. It becomes boring. And although I really enjoyed watching the interspersed segments of the past bleeding into the present, especially through very clever and admittedly very clever visual cues, one character running down the stairs while their childhood counterpart runs up the stairs, and they pass each other as we basically move from one story to the other. I like that. That was entertaining. That was interesting. And it was interesting in revealing the situations of the past that led them there. But in the terms of the storyline of the characters, is what they're going through, and Kaylee's objective of trapping this mirror into revealing itself, it was lackluster and boring because we knew it would never happen, and no matter how smart they played it, the mirror would overcome because it is able to manipulate perspective and action. Those two both together really, really killed this one for me. If it was able to manipulate perspective, a MacGuffin could be employed that would have worked perfectly. Okay, there was a crack in the mirror. Say there was more than a crack. Say that a piece was actually missing, and then it became found, and they found that looking at it through the other side, maybe it was, had kind of an opaque one-way quality to it, but looking at it from the other side revealed the truth. And maybe that could be a situation where that was a tool that was found in the last 20 minutes and now is a weapon that can be used against it, because no matter how much it manipulates perspective, the reality of the perspective can be seen through this thing. So they could be thinking they're out in the dining room when in fact they are standing in front of the anchor and protecting the mirror and potentially putting themselves in danger, but looking at the view thing, oh, there's the anchor. So perspective can be something where the hero could find a way to get around it, to overcome, and, slim chance, but there's a chance of winning. And that's what's most important, is whatever situation you have between a hero and a villain, especially when the hero is our protagonist. We love a David and Goliath story, but there's a big difference between a David and Goliath story and an ant versus an exterminator. The hero has to have a chance, even if it's a slim one, to overcome things. And even if it doesn't turn out well, that's fine. I'm not looking for a happy ending. What I'm looking for is a fight. And this was not a fight. This was a slaughter. And it became very obvious of that at that moment where they were moving the cameras. Because of the manipulating both actions and perspective, this was no longer a fight. This was a slaughter. And I knew it from that moment, and there was no changing it. So that's ultimately what I really felt about Oculus. I'm going to go and throw up all the scores here. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. This movie impressed the heck out of me. It absolutely did. The technical qualities to it, the acting qualities to it, the way that it set up the premise, the villain, everything about it, I really, really enjoyed. So this is an interesting one where the scoring system, I think, is still viable, but it does... I enjoyed the plot, I enjoyed the acting, I enjoyed the technical, but as far as the intent goes, with a quality storyline and interesting characters revealing more and more of themselves as they fight this evil, with a lot of scary things happening in the background, it did not have nearly the effect that it had on me, simply because of those few small things that were small in scope, but huge in storyline. And by taking me out of the movie, it really affected the intent score drastically. So this is a difficult one for me. Would I recommend it? I think, yeah, I absolutely would. I love Mike Flanagan's work. I love the Hell House series. And there were a lot of elements of this movie that I really, really enjoyed and were very, very impressed by. But it's not something that moved me, and I really felt like it should have. For having so few errors, the errors that it had turned into a massive snowball effect that I just couldn't overcome. So it's a movie that I would recommend, but it's also probably not a movie that I would watch again. Take that for what you will. But that's my review of 2013's Oculus. I really thank you for joining me here today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. And if you want to support me further, my Patreon link is below. Remember, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.